The moon hid behind thick clouds as Eliza Thorne pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the saloon's alley. Her breath came in controlled whispers, visible in the cold mountain air of Dustwater Creek. She'd been waiting here for near an hour, watching the massive silhouette of Cole Maddox through the dirty window as he nursed his whiskey alone at the bar. At 32, Eliza had learned that desperate times called for desperate measures. The leather satchel at her side held herbs that could heal a fever or stop a man's heart, depending on the dose. Tonight, she hoped she wouldn't need either. The saloon door creaked open, spilling yellow lamplight and drunken laughter into the darkness. Cole Maddox ducked through the doorframe, all 6'4" of him moving with the careful grace of a man who'd learned to survive by reading shadows. His hand rested easy on the Colt .45 at his hip. "Mr. Maddox." Eliza stepped from the darkness, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. The big man's hand twitched toward his gun, then stilled. His eyes, gray as winter storm clouds, narrowed as they took in the small black woman blocking his path. She wore a simple brown dress, patched but clean, with a woolen shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, not the usual type to corner men in dark alleys. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Best you move along. This ain't no place for a lady after dark." "I'm no lady. Mr. Maddox. I'm a doctor." Eliza lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And I have a proposition that might interest you." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Unless you're offering to cure what whiskey can't, I doubt that highly. I'm offering you $5,000. That stopped him cold. His eyes swept the alley, checking for ambush, finding none. He studied her face in the dim light filtering from the saloon. "Woman, I don't know what game you're playing, but no game. A business arrangement." Eliza took a breath, knowing the next words would seal her fate one way or another. "I need a husband. For 30 days. After that, you're free to go with your money." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope, somewhere down the street. A dog barked. The tinny notes of a piano drifted from the saloon. Cole's weathered face might have been carved from stone. "You're either crazy or desperate. Which is it?" "Both," Eliza admitted. "My father left me 800 acres up on Sage Mountain. Good land, with silver deposits. But according to the Homestead Act provision in this county, an unmarried woman can't inherit. I have 30 days to wed, or the land goes to auction. Plenty of men in this town would jump at that offer." "No." Her voice turned hard. "Every man in this town answers to Mayor Briggs, and Briggs wants my land. He's made sure no one will marry me." "Threaten their businesses, their families." She paused. "But you're not from here. You don't owe him anything." Cole studied her for a long moment. The woman had spine. He'd give her that, standing there in the dark, propositioning a stranger who could snap her neck with one hand. He'd seen plenty of desperate people in his 40 years of living, but something about her steady gaze and straight backbone set her apart. "Even if I believed you," he said slowly, "what makes you think I'm the marrying kind?" "I don't need the marrying kind. I need someone who won't buckle under pressure. Someone who can handle himself when Briggs sends his boys around." Her eyes flicked to the well-worn handle of his Colt. "Your reputation preceded you, Mr. Maddox. They say you rode with Quantrill's raiders. Say you've killed more men than smallpox. You believe everything you hear. I believe what I see. And I see a man who drinks alone, keeps his back to the wall, and counts every soul who enters a room. A man running from something, maybe, but not running scared." The assessment hit closer to truth than Cole cared to admit. He'd drifted into Dustwater Creek 3 days ago, hired by Briggs himself for what he'd called security work, the kind that usually involved persuading folks to see things the mayor's way. "Your offer's generous." Cole said. "Too generous. What aren't you telling me?" Eliza's jaw tightened. "Briggs killed my father." "Oh, not with a bullet. With poison, slow and careful. So it looked like mountain fever. But I know different. I've been doctoring folks in these parts for 10 years. I know what mercury poisoning looks like." "That's a heavy accusation." It's the truth. And once I have legal claim to that land, I aim to prove it. The silver on our property runs deep. Mr. Maddox, deep enough to buy this whole town twice over. That's what Briggs is after. Footsteps echoed from the street. 3 men rounded the corner, whiskey-bowled and looking for trouble. They stopped short at the sight of Eliza and Cole. Well, the largest of them sneered. If it ain't the witch doctor, finally found yourself a man. Eliza, are you putting a hex on this poor bastard? Evening, Jake Morrison. Eliza's voice stayed level, but Cole noticed her hand slip into the satchel at her side. I was just discussing business with Mr. Maddox. Jake spat tobacco juice near her feet. What kind of business would a decent man have with the likes of you? Cole shifted slightly, a movement so small it might have been missed, but suddenly he seemed to fill more space, throw a longer shadow, the kind that's none of your concern. Jake's mean little eyes darted between them. You're new here. Mister, maybe nobody told you, but this woman's daddy went crazy. Used to mutter about spirits and devils. Bad blood. Runs in her kind. Her kind? Cole's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You know what I mean. I surely do. Cole took a step forward. Jake and his friends took 2 back. I also know that 3 drunk cowards bothering a woman in an alley ain't something I care to witness. You boys run along now. Jake's face flushed red. His hand hovered near his gun, but something in Cole's stance, in the absolute stillness of his gun hand, made him reconsider. Mayor Briggs is going to hear about this, Jake blustered, but he was already backing away. You're making a mistake. Stranger, big mistake. They waited until the footsteps faded before Eliza spoke. They'll be back, with more men. Reckon so. She looked up at him, this mountain of a man who'd stood between her and trouble without being asked. Does that change your mind about my offer? Cole was quiet for a moment, considering he'd planned to drift on after Briggs's job. Like always, keep moving, keep the past from catching up. But something about this woman, standing proud despite the whole town's contempt, stirred something he'd thought long dead. Tell me straight, he said. This marriage, it's paper only? Paper only. Sleep in the barn if you like. After 30 days and the land is secured, we file for annulment. You take your money and go wherever you please. And if Briggs makes it hot before then we make it hotter. Steel entered her voice. I've buried 23 folks in this county. Mr. Maddox delivered 47 babies, saved more lives than I can count, including the children of some who now spit when I pass. I'm not running, not from my home. Cole found himself nodding slowly. He'd taken worse jobs for less noble causes, and if Mayor Briggs was the type to poison old men for their land, well, Cole had no qualms about ruining such plans. When? He asked. Tomorrow. Judge Watson rides circuit, and he'll be in town for 2 days. We marry in the courthouse at noon. The whole town will be watching. Let them watch. Eliza pulled her shawl tighter. Let them see that Eliza Thorne doesn't bend, doesn't break, and doesn't give up what's rightfully hers. Cole extended his hand, a gesture that would have been unseemly in polite society, a white man offering to shake hands with a black woman. But nothing about this was polite society. Eliza looked at his hand for a moment, then took it. Her grip was firm, calloused from years of work. Tomorrow then, Cole said. Noon, she agreed. And Mr. Maddox, thank you. He touched the brim of his hat. Don't thank me yet. Doc, this dance is just beginning. As Eliza disappeared into the darkness, Cole remained in the alley, thinking. He'd come to Dustwater Creek for a simple job, quick money. Instead, he'd found himself agreeing to marry a woman he'd just met, make an enemy of the most powerful man in the county, and stand against a whole town's prejudice. He pulled out his tobacco pouch, rolling a cigarette with steady hands. Somewhere up on Sage Mountain, 800 acres of land waited, land stolen by treachery, claimed by courage. Tomorrow at noon. He'd stand before a judge and speak words he never thought to say again. The last time he'd made marriage vows. He'd been young and foolish, believing in forever. The war had taken that wife, that life, that man he used to be. But this was different. This was business, a simple transaction. Cole struck a match, the flame briefly illuminating his scarred features. He had a feeling nothing about Eliza Thorne would be simple. The clouds parted momentarily, bathing the alley in silver moonlight. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, he had preparations to make. If Mayor Briggs wanted a fight, Cole would give him one. After all, he'd given his word to a woman brave enough to corner him in the dark. That had to count for something. The letter arrived at dawn, delivered by a nervous clerk who practically threw it at Eliza's door before scurrying away. She recognized the official seal even before breaking it open. The courthouse stationery felt heavy in her hands, weighted with finality. Notice of inheritance provision. She read aloud to the empty kitchen. Miss Eliza Thorne, you are hereby notified that pursuant to County Statute 14B, unmarried women cannot hold deed to inherited property exceeding 100 acres. You have 30 days from your father's date of death to comply with marriage requirements or forfeit all claims. 30 days. Her father had been in the ground for 6 months, but somehow the official notice had only just arrived. Mayor Briggs's handiwork, no doubt. He'd waited until the last possible moment, giving her barely enough time to panic. Eliza set the letter aside and continued preparing her morning tinctures. Her hands moved automatically, grinding willow bark for Martha Henderson's arthritis, mixing honey and whiskey with herbs for the Garrett boy's cough. The familiar work steadied her nerves. A knock interrupted her concentration. Through the window, she saw Samuel Wright, the banker, shifting nervously on her porch. At least he had the decency to come himself rather than send another messenger. Samuel, she greeted, opening the door but not inviting him in. The portly man removed his hat, sweat beading his forehead despite the morning chill. Eliza, I've come about a delicate matter, the marriage provision. His shoulders sagged with relief at not having to explain. You've received the notice, then? I'm sorry. Eliza, truly, your father was a good man, and what's happening here ain't right. But you'll follow the law. I have to. If you don't marry within the time limit, the bank is required to seize the property for auction. He twisted his hat in his hands. Briggs has already inquired about the date. He's prepared to bid. I'm sure he is. Eliza kept her voice level. Tell me, Samuel, how many men in this town have you spoken with about marrying me? The banker's face reddened. Now, Eliza, that's not proper. How many? He sighed. 12. Every unmarried man of appropriate age. And a few widowers besides. And? They all declined. Said they had other commitments, or suddenly remembered sweethearts in other towns. His voice dropped. Briggs has them scared. Eliza threatened to call in loans, revoke business licenses. Tom Morrison said Briggs promised to burn down his feed store if he so much as tipped his hat to you. Eliza nodded slowly. She'd expected as much, but hearing it confirmed still stung. Thank you for your honesty. Samuel, there might be another way. You could sell now to someone other than Briggs. Take what money you can get and start fresh somewhere else. Maybe California or... This is my home. The words came out sharper than intended. My father is buried on that mountain. My mother, too. I've delivered half the children in this valley and buried just as many of their grandparents. I won't run. Samuel replaced his hat with shaking hands. Then God help you, Eliza, because Harlan Briggs surely won't. After he left, Eliza stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the tools of her trade. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. Bottles of medicines lined the shelves. 10 years of building trust, saving lives, earning respect, or so she'd thought. But when push came to shove, fear trumped gratitude. She spent the morning making rounds, delivering medicines to those who still accepted her help. Most took the remedies but avoided eye contact, as if her unmarried state might be contagious. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson served her with pinched lips and inflated prices. $3 for flour? Eliza questioned. Times are hard. The woman replied, not meeting her eyes. Perhaps you should consider Mayor Briggs' generous offer for your land. I hear he'd pay fair market value. Half of fair market value, Eliza corrected. And we both know what's really under that land. Mrs. Patterson's face went pale. She glanced around the empty store and leaned forward. My husband owes Briggs money, she whispered. Nearly everyone does. He owns the bank, the lumber mill, half the businesses in town. Fighting him is like fighting the mountain itself. Mountains can be moved, Eliza said quietly. With enough faith. Faith don't stop bullets, girl. And it surely don't stop Briggs from destroying anyone who crosses him. She slid the flour across the counter. Take it for $2. And Eliza, find a husband. Any husband. Before it's too late. The afternoon brought more rejections. She approached Martin Fuller at his blacksmith shop, where she'd often traded remedies for horseshoes and repairs. The widower wouldn't even look up from his anvil. Can't help you, Miss Eliza, he grunted, hammering steadily. Got my own troubles. I could make it worth your while. Martin, a business arrangement. Nothing more. The hammer paused mid-swing. Your daddy saved my Sarah when she had the fever, sat with her 3 days straight. He finally met her eyes. Shame written across his weathered features. But I got 2 boys to think about. Briggs made it clear what would happen if any man stood at that altar with you. What did he threaten? Didn't have to threaten nothing. Just mentioned how accidents happen in smithies, how sparks can jump, how a burned-out blacksmith with 2 sons might find it hard to start over. He resumed hammering, each strike punctuating his words. I'm sorry, Eliza, I truly am. The story repeated across town. The livery owner suddenly remembered a cousin he'd promised to marry. The school teacher discovered a calling to missionary work. Even Walter Haynes, nearly 70 and missing most of his teeth, claimed he was too young to settle down again. By evening, Eliza had exhausted every possibility. She sat on her father's grave as the sun set behind Sage Mountain, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The wooden marker was simple. She'd carved it herself. Dr. Josiah Thorne, healer, father, murdered. She'd been careful to include that last word, though no one else would see it as truth. I won't let him win, Papa, she whispered to the cooling earth. I won't let him take what you built. The sound of horses made her look up. 3 riders approached along the mountain trail, dark silhouettes against the dying light. Her hand found the pistol in her medical bag, another lesson her father had taught her. Medicine might heal, but lead offered a different kind of cure. The riders stopped at the edge of the small cemetery. Jake Morrison led them, flanked by 2 men she didn't recognize. Hired guns, from the look of them. Cold eyes and tied-down holsters. Evening, Miss Thorne, Jake called, not bothering to dismount, paying respects. Something like that. She kept her hand near the pistol but didn't draw. 3 against 1 were poor odds, even with surprise on her side. Mayor wanted us to check on you. Make sure you got the courthouse notice all proper-like. How thoughtful. Jake grinned, an ugly expression on his pockmarked face. He also wanted to make you another offer. Generous man, the mayor. He'll give you $3,000 cash for the land, plus safe passage to anywhere you want to go. Even throw in a letter of recommendation for doctoring work. The land's worth $20,000, more, with the silver. Maybe, but you ain't got 30 days to wait for a better offer. Jake leaned forward in his saddle. Be smart, woman. Take the money and run. This ain't your fight to win. Every fight for justice is worth winning. One of the hired guns snorted. Justice? Lady, you're colored and female in a white man's town. Justice ain't got nothing to do with your situation. Eliza stood slowly, dignity in every movement. My father earned that land fair and square, worked it, improved it, found the silver that Briggs now covets. The color of my skin doesn't change the law. Don't it? Jake's grin widened. Guess we'll see in 30 days. Course, even if you found some fool to marry you, accidents happen. Mining country's dangerous. Cave-ins, explosions. Sometimes newlyweds don't make it to their first anniversary. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt the weight of the pistol in her bag, but kept her face calm. Is that all, Mr. Morrison? One more thing. Jake reached into his coat and withdrew a small bottle, tossing it at her feet. Mayor thought you might recognize this. Mercury sulfide. Same stuff you've been spreading lies about, claiming the doc used it on your daddy. Eliza's blood ran cold. Doctor, Pemberton had been Briggs's man through and through. If they were admitting to having mercury. See, thing is, Jake continued, mercury's got lots of uses. Mining, medicine, all sorts of applications. Be a shame if some turned up in the wrong places, like maybe the well at the schoolhouse, or in someone's food stores. He touched his hat brim in mock salute. Something to think about. Miss Thorne, 30 days can be awful long when you're watching everything you eat and drink. They rode off laughing, leaving Eliza alone with her father's grave and a bottle of poison at her feet. She picked it up carefully, recognizing the supplier's mark, the same mark she'd found on hidden bottles in Dr. Pemberton's office after her father died. The stars were coming out now, cold and distant. 30 days to find a husband no man in town would dare to be. 30 days with Briggs's threats hanging over everyone she tried to help. 30 days before everything her father built was stolen by the man who'd killed him. She walked back down the mountain trail by moonlight, the medical bag heavy at her side. Options ran through her mind like a diagnostic checklist. Leave and let Briggs win. Unacceptable. Stay and fight alone. Impossible. Find a husband outside the mayor's influence. But where? That's when she remembered the stranger who'd ridden into town 3 days past. Cole Maddox. Someone had called him. A drifter with hard eyes and harder reputation. Hired by Briggs himself for some unknown purpose. A man with no ties to the town. No debts to the mayor, no family to threaten. It was desperate, possibly mad, but as her father used to say, desperate diseases required desperate remedies. Eliza quickened her pace. She had a proposition to make and a dangerous man to find. Cole Maddox had been in Dustwater Creek for 3 days, and already he could smell the rot beneath its respectable surface. The town looked prosperous enough, fresh paint on the storefronts. New construction going up near the mine offices. Well-fed horses at the livery. But prosperity built on fear had a particular stench, and Cole had learned to recognize it from a dozen other towns that thought they could buy his gun and his conscience in the same transaction. He sat in the Silver Dollar Saloon, nursing his second whiskey of the evening and watching the locals give him a wide berth. Word traveled fast in small towns. The mysterious gunman hired by Mayor Briggs. The killer with dead eyes and steady hands. They'd built him up into something between a devil and a force of nature, which suited Cole fine. Fear meant distance, and distance meant peace. Briggs had been cagey about the job, talking in circles about security and protecting municipal interests. Cole had taken the advance payment, $50 in gold, and figured he'd learn the real story soon enough. He always did. The saloon doors swung open, bringing a gust of mountain air and nervous whispers. A small black woman entered, wearing a patched brown dress and carrying a medical bag. The room fell silent except for the tick of the clock and the crackle of the fire. Cole recognized her from around town, the doctor who'd inherited the mountain property Briggs kept mentioning, Eliza Thorne. He'd seen her making rounds, head high despite the cold shoulders and turned backs. Now she walked straight toward his table with the kind of purposeful stride that meant business. Interesting. The barkeep, a wiry man named Doyle, intercepted her halfway. "This ain't the place for you, Miss Thorne. Best you move along. I'm here to speak with Mr. Maddox." Her voice carried clear across the room. "It's a matter of business. Whatever business you got can wait for daylight and proper surroundings." Doyle insisted. "This is a respectable establishment." Cole set down his glass with deliberate slowness. "I'll let her through." "Doyle!" The barkeep's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "But Mr. Maddox, it ain't proper. I'll decide what's proper at my table." Cole's tone suggested the conversation was over. Doyle retreated behind his bar, muttering about standards and declining morals. Eliza approached and stood across from him, not waiting for an invitation to sit. Up close, Cole could see the exhaustion she was fighting, dark circles under determined eyes, shoulders set against a weight that wanted to crush them down. But her hands were steady, and she met his gaze without flinching. "Mr. Maddox, I have a proposition for you." "So I gathered." He gestured to the empty chair. "Might as well sit. You're giving Doyle apoplexy?" She sat, placing her medical bag on the table between them like a barrier. Or maybe a peace offering. "I need a husband." Cole had been reaching for his whiskey. He paused, studying her face for signs of madness or jest. Finding neither, he completed the motion and took a long sip. "That's direct. I don't have time for indirect." She pulled out a document. The courthouse notice. He realized. 30 days to marry or lose 800 acres of land. Every man in town is too frightened of Mayor Briggs to help me. You're not from town. No, Cole agreed. I'm not. You're also in Briggs's employ, which presents a complication. But I'm prepared to make it worth your while to reconsider that arrangement. Cole leaned back, assessing. The woman had nerve, approaching him like this, in public, no less, where every ear was straining to catch their words. "What makes you think I'm the marrying kind, Miss Thorne?" "I don't need the marrying kind. I need someone who won't buckle when Briggs applies pressure. Someone with a reputation that might give his hired thugs pause." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to the Colt at his hip. The marriage would be a legal formality only, 30 days, then an annulment. "I'm offering $5,000. A low whistle escaped from someone at the bar. 5,000 was more than most men saw in a decade of hard labor. Cole kept his expression neutral, though his interest sharpened. That kind of money meant desperation. And desperation meant there was more to this story. "That's a generous offer for a paper marriage," he observed. "What aren't you telling me?" Eliza glanced around the room, noting the poorly concealed attention of their audience. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." "Here's fine. Whatever you're selling. Might as well let everyone hear. Save them the trouble of making up their own version later." She considered this, then nodded. "Very well. Mayor Briggs murdered my father to get our land. He used Dr. Pemberton to administer mercury over time, making it look like natural illness. The silver vein on our property runs deep, worth 50,000 at least, maybe more." The room erupted in whispers. Accusations of murder weren't thrown around lightly, especially against the most powerful man in town. Cole noticed several patrons heading for the door, no doubt racing to report this development to Briggs. "That's a serious charge," Cole said mildly. "You have proof." "I have my father's symptoms, which match mercury poisoning exactly. I have bottles of mercury hidden in Dr. Pemberton's office after he conveniently died in a riding accident last month. And I have the fact that Briggs has been buying up all the land around ours, knowing where the silver runs." She leaned forward. "What I don't have is 30 days to prove it unless I can secure my inheritance." Cole finished his whiskey, mind working through the angles. Briggs had hired him for security, but hadn't mentioned anything about a forced marriage or stolen land. The mayor had painted Eliza Thorne as a troublemaker refusing to sell. Nothing more. But Cole had learned long ago that the man paying usually had the most to hide. "Assuming I believe you," he said slowly. "What's to stop Briggs from having us both killed after the wedding? Dead newlyweds can't inherit any more than spinsters." "Because the whole town will be watching. Because I've already sent letters to the territorial governor about my suspicions. Because killing us would only confirm guilt." She paused. "And because I suspect you're not as easy to kill as most men." "Flattery, Miss Thorne. Observation, Mr. Maddox. I've seen how you move, how you watch exits, how your hand never strays far from your weapon. You're not just some hired gun. You're a survivor." Cole found himself almost smiling. The woman was sharp. He'd give her that. And there was something about her, that combination of steel spine and desperate hope, that reminded him of better times, better people, People worth protecting instead of burying. When? He asked, just as he would again hours later in the alley. Relief flickered across her features before she schooled them back to composure. Judge Watson arrives tomorrow. We could marry at noon, make it official before Briggs has time to interfere. He'll interfere anyway. Yes, she agreed simply. He will. Cole stood, tossing coins on the table for his drinks. The room watched with held breath as he looked down at Eliza Thorne, this small, fierce woman who'd gambled everything on a stranger's cooperation. I'll need to speak with Briggs first, he said. And my employment proper like. Man deserves to hear it straight when someone's switching sides. That could be dangerous. Most things worth doing are... He touched his hat brim. I'll find you in the morning, Miss Thorne. We can work out the details then. She stood as well, gathering her medical bag. Mr. Maddox? Why are you considering this? Really? Cole thought about lying, giving her something pretty about justice or righteousness. But something in her direct gaze demanded truth. Because I've been in too many towns where men like Briggs win. Maybe it's time to see what happens when they don't. Eliza nodded, as if this answer satisfied something deep within her. Until morning, then. She left the saloon with the same purposeful stride, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed her exit. Cole watched her go, then turned his attention to the room at large. Most folks suddenly found their drinks fascinating. Doyle, he called to the barkeep. Where does Mayor Briggs take his evening meal? The Imperial Hotel, usually, has a private dining room there. Doyle polished a glass with shaking hands. Mr. Maddox, no disrespect meant, but getting tangled up with the Thorne woman. It ain't healthy. Briggs has plans for that land. I'm sure he does. Cole headed for the door. But plans have a way of changing. The walk to the Imperial Hotel gave Cole time to think. He'd drifted into Dustwater Creek looking for nothing more than a few days' work and drinking money. Now he was considering marriage to a woman he'd just met, making an enemy of his employer, and picking a fight with the kind of institutional corruption that usually ended with bodies in unmarked graves. Must be getting sentimental in his old age. The Imperial Hotel stood 3 stories tall, the finest building in Dustwater Creek. Electric lights, still a novelty in these parts, blazed from its windows. Cole found Briggs in the private dining room as expected, cutting into a thick steak while his lieutenant, a ferret-faced man named Hutchins, read from a ledger. Maddox. Briggs didn't look up from his meal. Heard you had an interesting visitor at the saloon. News did travel fast. Yes, sir. Miss Thorne made me an offer. Did she now? Briggs set down his knife and fork, giving Cole his full attention. He was a handsome man in his 50s, silver-haired and well-dressed, with the kind of smooth manners that made people forget the blood under his manicured nails. And what did the good doctor want with my hired man? A husband. Seems she's having trouble finding one locally. Briggs chuckled. Can't imagine why. Hutchins, remind me, how many businesses do I hold notes on? 17, Mr. Briggs. Plus the bank itself, of course. 17. Briggs picked up his knife again. Amazing how civic responsibility can align community interests, isn't it? Now, I trust you declined Miss Thorne's offer. Actually, Cole said evenly, I'm considering it. The knife paused halfway to Briggs's mouth. Hutchins stopped writing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I must have misheard. Briggs said softly, It sounded like you said you're considering marrying that woman. Your hearing's fine. Briggs set down his utensils with exaggerated care. Mr. Maddox, perhaps you don't understand the situation. I hired you for a specific purpose, to provide security for my interests in this town. The Thorne property is very much my interest. Then maybe you should have mentioned that when you hired me. All I heard was talk about general security, protecting municipal property. Cole shrugged. Nothing about forcing women off their land or covering up murders. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Briggs's eyes narrowed to slits. Careful. Maddox, slander's a serious offense. So's poisoning old men for their silver claims. Hutchins' hand drifted toward the pistol at his hip. Cole didn't move, but something in his stillness made the smaller man reconsider. Briggs studied Cole for a long moment. "What's your price? Everyone has one. 10,000? 20? I can be generous to those who serve my interests. Already named my price. 5,000 in 30 days of marriage. After that, I drift on. And you can deal with Miss Thorne however you see fit." Unacceptable. Briggs's veneer of civility cracked slightly. "That woman is a disruption to the natural order of this town. Her father filled her head with ideas above her station, and now she thinks she can stand against progress. Against me. Seems to me she's standing just fine." Briggs stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're making a mistake. Maddox, I own this town. The law, the businesses, the very ground you're standing on. Cross me, and you'll find yourself in a shallow grave faster than you can draw that fancy colt." Cole smiled then, an expression devoid of warmth. "Mr. Briggs, I've put more men in shallow graves than you've had hot dinners. You want to add yourself to that count. You just keep talking." The two men stared at each other across the remnants of Briggs's meal. Hutchins looked between them nervously, hand still hovering near his weapon. Finally, Briggs sat back down. "Get out of my hotel, Maddox. Consider your employment terminated, and if you're foolish enough to stand at that altar tomorrow, consider your life terminated as well." Cole touched his hat brim in mock salute. "Pleasure doing business with you. Mayor, I'll send someone for my things." He left the Imperial Hotel with a distinct feeling of crosshairs on his back. But for the first time in years, he also felt something else. Purpose. Tomorrow at noon, he'd speak words he never thought to say again to a woman brave enough to fight for what was hers. It was probably foolish, definitely dangerous, almost certainly going to end badly. Cole found himself looking forward to it. The courthouse bell tolled noon as Eliza Thorne stood before Judge Watson, trying to ignore the hostile crowd packed into every available space. The air hung thick with tobacco smoke and barely contained violence. She'd worn her best dress, a deep blue wool her father had bought her last Christmas, and pinned her mother's cameo at her throat. Small gestures of dignity in the face of the town's contempt. Cole Maddox stood beside her, cleaned up considerable from their alley meeting. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jaw marked by an old scar, and wore a black suit that had seen better days but fit his broad frame well enough. His gun belt remained strapped on, a not-so-subtle reminder to anyone considering interrupting the proceedings. Judge Watson, a circuit rider in his 60s with the demeanor of a man who'd seen too much foolishness to be surprised by anymore, cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I must ask if anyone present has legal objection to this union." "I object." Mayor Briggs pushed through the crowd, Hutchins and Jake Morrison flanking him. "This marriage is a sham, Your Honor. A blatant attempt to circumvent the law." The judge peered over his spectacles. "On what grounds?" "Mayor, Miss Thorne is attempting to defraud the county by entering into a marriage of convenience solely to retain property she has no right to possess. The law says an unmarried woman cannot inherit." Eliza spoke up, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It says nothing about the motivations for marriage, unless Mayor Briggs is suggesting he knows the intimate details of my relationship with Mr. Maddox?" A few snickers rose from the crowd, quickly silenced by Briggs's glare. Judge Watson nodded slowly. "The mayor raises an interesting point, but not a legal one. The statute is clear. Marriage is the requirement, not the reasoning behind it, unless you have evidence of coercion or incapacity." "The woman consorts with spirits," someone shouted from the back. "She ain't right in the head." "I practice medicine," Eliza corrected firmly. "Using knowledge passed down through generations and proven by science. If healing the sick makes me mad, then I'll gladly claim the title." Cole shifted slightly, his presence a silent wall between Eliza and the crowd's hostility. "Your Honor, might we proceed? Miss Thorne and I have waited long enough." Judge Watson studied them both, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "Very well, but I'll have order in my court. Any disruptions and I'll clear the room. Marriages or no marriages. The ceremony itself was brief, the traditional words sounding strange in the charged atmosphere. When Judge Watson asked if anyone knew reason why they should not be joined, the room held its breath. But Briggs remained silent, his face a mask of cold fury. "Do you, Cole Maddox, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice carried clearly, no hesitation. "Do you, Eliza Thorne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The ring? Cole produced a simple gold band, where he'd found it on such short notice. Eliza couldn't guess. It fit perfectly, warm against her skin. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Watson closed his book with finality. "What God has joined, let no man tear asunder." The room erupted. Shouts of outrage mixed with a few scattered applause. Eliza was surprised to see Martha Henderson clapping defiantly, along with young Tom Garrett, whose cough she'd been treating. But most faces showed disgust, anger, or calculating coldness. "This ain't over," Jake Morrison snarled, pushing closer. "You think a piece of paper's gonna protect you?" Cole's hand dropped to his gun. "I think you're going to step back, friend, now." "Or what? You'll shoot me in front of the judge?" "No," Cole said mildly. "I'll break your arm in 3 places, then maybe shoot you." Jake paled but held his ground until Briggs placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Gentlemen, please," the mayor said smoothly. "We're all civilized people here, Mr. and Mrs. Maddox have made their choice. They'll live with the consequences." The threat in his cultured voice was unmistakable. Eliza felt Cole tense beside her, but before anyone could escalate, a commotion arose from outside. "Mrs." Sarah Fuller pushed through the crowd, her 2 young boys in tow. "Wait," she called, breathing hard. "I have something to say." Her husband Martin followed, trying to pull her back. "Sarah, don't!" She shook him off, marching up to Eliza with tears streaming down her weathered face. "I'm sorry," she said loudly. "For all of it. For looking away when you needed help. For being too scared to speak up." She turned to address the crowd. "This woman saved my life. Sat with me 3 days and nights when everyone else had given up. And how do we repay her? With spite and cowardice." "Woman, hold your tongue," someone warned. "I will not." Sarah's voice rose. "My boys are alive because of Eliza Thorne, Eliza Maddox now, and if standing by her means losing everything, then maybe everything ain't worth keeping." She pulled out a small wrapped package, pressing it into Eliza's hands. "Wedding gift," she whispered. "It ain't much, but it's given with love." The gesture broke something loose. Old Man Cooper shuffled forward, placing a silver dollar on the judge's desk. "For the new couple," he mumbled. "Doc Thorne fixed my hip last winter. Didn't ask for payment when I couldn't afford it." One by one, others came forward. Not many, maybe a dozen out of the 100 packed into the courthouse. But enough. The widow Martinez brought bread wrapped in a clean cloth. Ben Taylor, the freedman who worked at the livery, offered a blessing in a voice that shook with emotion. Young Annie Watson, the judge's own daughter, shyly handed Eliza a handful of wildflowers. "Get out!" "Sss," Briggs roared, his composure finally cracking. "All of you get out. Any man does business with these people will answer to me. Any store that serves them, any hand that helps them, I'll crush you all." The supporters wavered but didn't retreat entirely. Judge Watson banged his gavel. "Mayor Briggs, you're out of order. This is still my courtroom until I leave town tomorrow." "Your courtroom?" Briggs laughed bitterly. "You think your authority means anything here? Old man, I own this town. I own the law, and I'll own that mountain despite this charade." "That sounds dangerously close to threatening a federal judge," Watson observed. "I'd choose my next words carefully. Mayor." The 2 men locked eyes for a long moment before Briggs turned on his heel. "Clear the courthouse," he ordered his men. "The show's over." As the crowd dispersed, Cole kept Eliza close, watching every face. every hand that might stray toward a weapon. The few supporters huddled together, clearly worried about retribution but unwilling to abandon the newlyweds entirely. Outside, Eliza blinked in the afternoon sun, still processing what had happened. The ring on her finger caught the light, foreign but not unwelcome. Cole stood beside her, scanning the street with professional wariness. "Where to now, Mrs. Maddox?" he asked, the name sounding strange on his lips. "The house on Sage Mountain. Our house now, I suppose." She looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time since he'd arrived at the courthouse. "Thank you for going through with this." "Made a deal," he said simply. "I keep my deals." Sarah Fuller approached tentatively, her boys hiding behind her skirts. "Eliza, we'd like to help get you settled. Martin's bringing the wagon around." "Sarah, no," Eliza protested. "You've done enough. Briggs will—" "Let him come," Martin Fuller interrupted. Joining his wife, the big blacksmith looked grimly determined. "I've been scared too long, watching them poison your PA, threatening folks, acting like God Almighty. Maybe it's time someone stood up." More wagons appeared, driven by the handful who'd shown support in the courthouse. Not many, but enough to form a small convoy. Cole's eyebrows rose slightly. "Appears you've got yourself a rebellion." "Doc," he murmured. "Appears so." Eliza agreed, warmth spreading through her chest. "Though I suspect it'll cost them dear." "Most things worth doing do." The wedding party made its way through town, a ragtag procession that drew stares and whispers. Some folks turned their backs, but others watched with something like hope in their eyes. As they passed the general store, Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway, conflict written across her face, at the edge of town, where the road began winding up toward Sage Mountain. Jake Morrison and a group of riders blocked their path. Going somewhere, newlyweds. Cole handed Eliza the reins of their wagon and stepped down, moving with the easy grace of a man comfortable with violence. "We're going home. You're welcome to try stopping us. 6 against 1 ain't good odds." "Maddox?" "You're right," Cole agreed. "You should have brought more men." The moment stretched taut. Then Martin Fuller stepped down from his wagon, hammer in hand. Ben Taylor followed, then old Cooper with an ancient shotgun. Not fighters, any of them, but standing nonetheless. Jake's certainty wavered. "This ain't your fight, Fuller. Been my fight since I let fear turn me yellow." Martin replied, "Get out of the way, Jake, or don't, but decide quick." The riders looked to Jake, who looked back toward town where Briggs was undoubtedly watching. Finally, with a curse, he yanked his horse aside. "This ain't over, not by half. Never thought it was," Cole said pleasantly. "Give the mayor our regards." The convoy continued up the mountain as shadows lengthened across the valley. Eliza's house, her father's house, came into view just as the sun touched the western peaks. It wasn't much, but it was home. A sturdy log structure with a good roof and clear views in all directions. Defensive positions. Cole noted with approval. As the supporters unloaded supplies they'd brought, food, ammunition, tools, Eliza stood beside her new husband, looking down at Dustwater Creek spread below like a promise or a threat. "They'll come," she said quietly. "Tonight, tomorrow, soon. Yes. Think we can hold them off?" Cole was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the mountains red. "Your father built well, good sight lines, solid construction, fresh water from the mountain spring. We can hold for a while. But not forever. Nothing lasts forever. Doc," he glanced at her, something almost like a smile touching his scarred features. "But sometimes a while is enough. Sometimes it's all you need to change things." Eliza touched the ring on her finger, thinking of the supporters who'd risked Briggs's wrath, of the fear beginning to crack in Dustwater Creek, of her father's dream of justice. "Then we'd better make our while count," she said, behind them. Sarah Fuller called out that she'd started supper, the house filled with voices, with life, with the beginning of something that might be hope. and as darkness crept across the valley, Eliza Maddox stood with her husband of convenience and prepared for war. The first attack came on the third night, as Cole had predicted. He'd spent the intervening days turning the mountain house into a fortress, boarding vulnerable windows, creating clear fields of fire, positioning water barrels against the possibility of flames. Eliza worked alongside him, her medical supplies reorganized for treating wounds rather than illness. The supporters who'd helped them move in had returned to town, unable to abandon their livelihoods entirely. But Martin Fuller had left tools and scrap iron. Ben Taylor had smuggled up ammunition, and the widow Martinez sent her grandson Miguel with fresh bread and a warning. Jake Morrison's been recruiting guns from the mining camps, offering good money for men who ain't particular about their work. Now, as midnight approached, Cole sat on the front porch, rifle across his knees, listening to the mountain breathe. Beside him, Eliza cleaned her father's old Henry repeater, movements sure despite the darkness. "You should get some sleep," he said quietly. "Could be a long night. Could be a long 30 days, she countered. "I'll sleep when you do." They'd developed an easy rhythm over the past days, two people learning to share space without intruding on it. Cole had insisted on taking the barn, leaving the house to her. But they ate meals together and worked side by side. He'd even helped her tend to Ben Taylor's son when the boy had shown up with a deep cut from a broken bottle, clearly Briggs' men sending a message. "Movement," Cole murmured, rising smoothly. "Northwest, coming up the deer trail." Eliza strained to see, but caught only shadows among shadows. Cole, however, tracked something invisible to her eyes. 8, maybe 10 riders, moving slow, trying to keep quiet. "Jake? Most like. Question is whether they're here to scare or shoot." He checked his rifle, then handed her a box of ammunition. "Get inside, bar the door. Windows are already shuttered. If shooting starts, stay low and only fire if they breach the house. And you? I'll be discouraging them from getting that far." Before she could protest, he melted into the darkness, moving with a silence that belied his size. Eliza retreated to the house, her father's rifle heavy in her hands. Through a crack in the shutters, she watched the night and waited. The riders emerged from the tree line like ghosts, spreading out to encircle the house. Jake Morrison's voice carried on the still air. "Maddox, we know you're watching. Come out and let's discuss this like civilized men." Silence answered him. "No need for bloodshed," Jake continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Mayor Briggs is a reasonable man, willing to up his offer. 10,000 cash for you to ride out tonight. Leave the woman and the land. Take enough money to set yourself up proper somewhere else." Still nothing. The riders shifted nervously, peering into the darkness. Then Cole's voice came from somewhere entirely different than they'd been watching. "Tell Briggs his money's no good here." The riders spun, searching for the source. Jake's hand dropped to his gun. "Don't be a fool. Maddox, you're one man against—" The shot came from the opposite direction, taking the hat clean off Jake's head. The riders cursed, horses dancing nervously. "That's one," Cole called out, now from a third position. "Next one won't be so friendly. You boys best head back down the mountain while you can still ride." "Rush the house," Jake snarled. "He can't get all of us." The riders spurred forward, but Cole had anticipated this. The first rope stretched across the path took down 2 horses. The second caught another rider at chest height, yanking him from the saddle. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness, but Cole was already moving, always where they didn't expect. Eliza watched in amazement as her husband waged a one-man war against superior numbers. He'd turned the terrain to his advantage, using every rock, every tree, every fold of ground. A rider got close to the house. She put a bullet through his shoulder, sending him tumbling. "The woman can shoot," someone yelled. "Jake, this ain't worth—" Another rifle crack, another saddle emptied. The remaining riders milled in confusion, firing at shadows while Cole picked them apart with methodical precision. "Fall back," Jake finally ordered, his bravado crumbling. "Retreat! Damn you!" The survivors fled down the mountain, leaving 3 wounded men groaning in the dirt. Cole materialized from the darkness, checking each fallen rider with professional efficiency. "None dead," he reported when Eliza emerged, though that one might wish he was come morning. He gestured to a man clutching his knee. "You want to patch them up?" It was a test, she realized. These men had come to burn her out, maybe kill her, and now he was asking if she'd honor her healer's oath. "Help me get them inside," she said simply. They spent the next hour with Eliza extracting bullets and setting bones while Cole stood guard. The wounded men watched her with mixtures of pain, confusion, and reluctant gratitude. When she'd finished, Cole loaded them into a wagon they'd left behind. "You tell Briggs something for me," he said to the least injured. "Tell him the next group won't ride away. Tell him I've been patient so far, professional, but he sends men after my wife again. I'll take it personal, and personal for me means a lot of fresh graves. You understanding me?" The man nodded rapidly, eager to be gone. They watched the wagon lumber away, then stood in the dooryard as dawn crept across the mountains. "That was impressive," Eliza said. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Places I'd rather forget," he said finally. "Wars that didn't need fighting, for causes that weren't worth the blood. But sometimes the skills from bad times serve good purposes." She touched his arm gently. "Thank you." He looked down at her hand, then at her face. Something passed between them, fragile as morning frost. Then he stepped back, rebuilding the walls. "I'll check the perimeter, make sure they didn't leave any surprises." The attacks continued over the following days, each more desperate than the last. Briggs sent lawyers with legal challenges, which Judge Watson had anticipated and countered before leaving town. He sent intimidators who found Cole unintimidatable. He sent arsonists who discovered the clearing Cole had created around the house, fire breaks that turned their flames to smoke. But it wasn't all violence. Support from town grew quietly stronger. Families Eliza had helped began leaving supplies at the foot of the mountain, ammunition hidden in flour sacks, messages of encouragement tucked between preserves. Even some who'd initially opposed the marriage started questioning Briggs's tactics. "Fear's a funny thing," Martin Fuller observed during one of his visits. "Push too hard, too long, and it starts to turn into something else. Anger, maybe, or just tired of being afraid." The 20th day brought a new development. Cole was repairing damage from the latest night raid when a rider approached under a white flag. Not one of Briggs's usual men. This one wore city clothes and carried himself like someone used to authority. "Mr. Maddox? I'm James Cartwright, attorney representing certain interests in Denver." He dismounted carefully, hands visible. "I'd like to speak with you and your wife about a business proposition." Cole kept his rifle ready but nodded toward the house. "Speak your piece." Inside, Cartwright accepted coffee and got to the point. "Word of your situation has reached certain ears in the capital. Investors who are very interested in the mineral rights to this land. They're prepared to offer $40,000 for a controlling interest in any mining operation." "Not interested," Eliza said flatly. "This land isn't for sale." "Not sale, ma'am. Partnership. You'd retain ownership and a significant percentage of profits. More importantly, you'd have the backing of powerful men. Men who could make Mayor Briggs's life very difficult if he continues his harassment." Cole and Eliza exchanged glances. It was tempting, financial security and political protection in one package, but "What's the catch?" Cole asked. Cartwright smiled thinly. "Clever man. The investors would want certain assurances, proof that the marriage is legitimate. For one, they can't be seen supporting fraud." "It's legitimate," Eliza said stiffly. "Legally, yes, but there are questions about its practical nature, separate sleeping arrangements. For instance, a marriage of convenience rather than affection." He spread his hands. "The investors need to know they're backing a stable situation." The implication hung heavy. Cole's jaw tightened. "Man makes assumptions about my marriage, might find himself making them through broken teeth." No offense intended, Cartwright said quickly. I'm simply conveying concerns. The investors might be more comfortable if, say, the marriage continued beyond the 30-day requirement. 6 months, perhaps. Long enough to establish genuine residence and partnership. After he left, Eliza stood at the window watching his retreat. 6 months, she murmured. He's asking us to extend the arrangement. You could have your pick of husbands once the 30 days are up, Cole pointed out. Plenty of men would be interested once Briggs is dealt with. She turned to look at him. And you? What will you do after 30 days? He shrugged, but something flickered in his eyes. Drift on, like always. Find another town, another job. Is that what you want? The question hung between them. Over the past weeks, they'd moved from strangers to partners to something harder to define. The way he smiled, rarely but genuinely, when she successfully handled a rifle. The way she touched his shoulder when nightmares of old wars disturbed his sleep. Small moments building into something neither had expected. Before Cole could answer, gunfire erupted from the tree line. But this time it wasn't aimed at the house. The shooters were firing at each other. Through the chaos came Martin Fuller's voice. For the dock! For justice! The rebellion had begun. Townsfolk who'd suffered under Briggs's boot had finally reached their breaking point. The wedding, the resistance, the slow crack in the mayor's power. It had all combined into something larger than anyone expected. Cole grabbed his rifle. Looks like your while just became now. Doc. Eliza loaded her Henry repeater, thinking of her father, of the land he'd loved, of the man beside her who'd started as a business arrangement and become something more. Then let's make it count, she said. And together they went out to join the fight for Dustwater Creek's soul. The revelation came by accident, as most truths do. Eliza was sorting through her father's papers on the 25th day of their marriage, looking for land surveys to show the Denver investors, when she found his final journal hidden beneath a false bottom in his desk drawer. The last entries made her hands shake. March 3rd. The weakness grows worse. Doctor, Pemberton insists on more medicine, but I see how his hands tremble when he measures the doses. Mercury. I recognize the symptoms now. Fool that I've been. March 7th. Briggs visited today. So concerned, so sympathetic. He spoke of Eliza's future, how hard it would be for her alone, how reasonable his offer for the land remains. The devil quotes scripture while poisoning the wine. March 10th. My hands shake too much to write long. Must hide this. Eliza will need proof. The silver runs deeper than even Briggs knows. The old Ute showed me the true vein before they were forced out. Enough wealth to buy justice, if she can live long enough to mine it. Tell her to look where her mother planted the roses. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't protect her better. Eliza sat back, tears blurring her vision. Her father had known, had spent his final days aware of his murder, unable to act as the poison stole his strength. The roses, her mother's prize roses that bloomed despite the mountain altitude, planted in that peculiar pattern near the eastern slope. Cole, she called, but he was already at the door, drawn by something in her voice. She showed him the journal, watched his face harden as he read. We need to check those roses, he said grimly. They went together, shovels in hand, and dug carefully around the rose bushes. 3 feet down, they hit something solid, not bedrock, but wooden planking. Cole pried up the boards to reveal her father's final secret, samples of silver ore so pure it gleamed in the afternoon sun, along with a surveyor's map marking the true vein. Sweet Jesus, Cole breathed. This isn't just a mine. It's a fortune. No wonder Briggs was willing to kill for it. But there was more. Wrapped in oilcloth, they found letters between Briggs and Dr. Pemberton discussing the treatment and payment schedules, references to other properties acquired after mysterious illnesses, a pattern of murder disguised as medicine. This is it, Eliza said, clutching the papers. This is the proof we need. Cole studied the documents with a soldier's eye for strategy. Proof needs a judge who'll listen, and Briggs owns every lawman in 50 miles. Not every lawman, Judge Watson said he'd be back through the circuit in 2 weeks, and the federal marshal in Denver would need more than accusations. These letters are damning but not explicit. A good lawyer could argue they're discussing legitimate medical treatment. Eliza's shoulders sagged. So close to justice, yet still so far. Then what do? We get Pemberton's records, Cole said decisively. You said he died in a riding accident last month? His office might still have... No. His widow packed everything up, sold the practice to Dr. Hartley from Silverton. Eliza paused, thinking. But Martha Henderson helped clean out the office. She mentioned boxes in Pemberton's cellar that misses. Pemberton didn't want to sort through medical records. She said decades of them. Cole nodded slowly. Tonight then, after the moon sets. They waited until the town slept, then made their way down the mountain. The Pemberton house sat at the edge of Dustwater Creek, windows dark since the widow had moved to her sister's in Colorado Springs. Cole picked the lock with skills Eliza didn't ask about, and they slipped inside. The cellar was musty, packed with the detritus of a 20-year medical practice. By lamplight, they searched through boxes of patient files, looking for patterns. What they found exceeded their worst suspicions. Look at this, Eliza whispered, showing Cole a ledger. Payment records. Every time someone got sick with mountain fever, Briggs paid Pemberton $50. And here, she pointed to a list of names. Every one of these people owned land Briggs wanted. Everyone died within 6 months of first treatment. 14 names. Cole counted grimly. Your father was just the latest. Eliza pulled out more files, cross-referencing deaths with land transfers. The scope of the conspiracy grew with each document, but then she found something that made her gasp. Cole, look at this. It's dated next week. She showed him a paper, a treatment schedule with her own name at the top. They were planning to poison me too, after the land went to auction. Briggs would have bought it cheap. Then I'd conveniently fall ill. Footsteps on the porch above made them freeze. The front door opened. Voices drifting down. Sure, I heard something. Jake Morrison was saying. Saw lamplight from the street. Check it out then. Another voice replied. Boss wants no loose ends before the judge arrives. Cole blew out the lamp, plunging them into darkness. He pulled Eliza behind a stack of crates, hand on his gun. The cellar door opened, spilling light down the stairs. Anyone down there? Jake called. No answer. Probably rats. Still, better check. Boots on stairs. Cole tensed, ready to fight their way out. But Eliza had another idea. She felt along the wall until she found what she remembered from treating Pemberton's son years ago, a coal chute leading outside. She tugged Cole's sleeve, guiding him through the darkness. The chute was narrow, filthy, but passable. They squeezed through, emerging behind the house just as Jake's curses echoed from the cellar. The files, someone shouted. Someone's been in the files. Cole and Eliza ran, keeping to shadows. Documents clutched tight. Behind them, alarm bells began to ring. By the time they reached the mountain road, half the town seemed to be awake. They'll come for us now, Eliza panted as they climbed. All of them. Let them come, Cole said fiercely. We've got what we needed. Back at the house, they barricaded themselves in and spread out their evidence. The proof was overwhelming. Names, dates, payments, poison schedules, enough to hang Briggs and half his organization. Dawn brought what they expected. Briggs himself rode up with 20 men, abandoning all pretense of legality. Maddox, he shouted, you and that woman have stolen private property. Come out now, and I might let you live long enough to stand trial. Cole appeared at an upstairs window, rifle visible. Only thing stolen here is 14 lives. Briggs, including Josiah Thorne's. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Eliza joined her husband at the window. We have Pemberton's records. Every murder, every payment, every grain of mercury you bought to poison innocent people. The color drained from Briggs' face. You're lying. August 15th, 1889, Eliza called out, reading from a paper. $50 to Pemberton for special treatment of Hans Muller, September 2nd. Muller dies, September 5th. You purchased the Muller farm for back taxes. Should I continue? Murmurs rose from Briggs's men. Some of them had known Muller, had maybe even liked him. Murder for hire was one thing, but systematic killing of neighbors was another. Burn them out, Briggs snarled. Burn the house and everything in it. But before his men could act, new riders appeared on the road. Martin Fuller led them, along with Ben Taylor, the widow Martinez's sons, and a dozen others from town, all armed, all grim-faced. Stand down, Briggs, Martin called. We've heard enough. You dare? Briggs wheeled on them. I own you, Fuller, all of you. Not anymore, Sarah Fuller said, riding beside her husband. We've voted. You're no longer mayor. And these gentlemen, she gestured to several unfamiliar riders, are federal marshals from Denver. Judge Watson sent them ahead when he heard about the troubles. The lead marshal, a weathered man with sharp eyes, rode forward. Harlan Briggs, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and corruption. You men with him, drop your weapons or share his fate. The confrontation balanced on a knife's edge. Then one of Briggs' hired guns threw down his rifle. I didn't sign on for killing neighbors, he muttered. Others followed, stepping away from their former boss. Briggs went for his gun, desperation making him reckless. Cole's shot took him in the shoulder. Spinning him from his horse, he lay in the dirt, clutching his wound, all his power reduced to bleeding flesh. It's over, the marshal said, his men moving to secure prisoners. Mrs. Maddox, we'll need those documents for evidence. Eliza nodded, still hardly believing it had ended. Beside her, Cole lowered his rifle, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. You did it, he said quietly. Got justice for your father. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have survived without you. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his gray eyes. Eliza, the 30 days are almost up, she said softly. You're free to go whenever you want. Cole was quiet for a long moment, watching the marshals lead Briggs away, watching the townsfolk gather around their house with joy instead of hostility. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Maybe I don't want to go. Maybe I found something worth staying for. Eliza's heart skipped, but before she could respond, Sarah Fuller was calling them down to celebrate. The moment passed, but the promise in it lingered like silver in torchlight, precious and true. The courthouse had never seen such a crowd. Every seat was filled, people standing along the walls and spilling out into the street. Judge Watson had returned with 2 federal judges from Denver, understanding that this case would set precedents far beyond Dustwater Creek. Eliza sat in the front row, wearing her mother's best dress, black silk with pearl buttons. Cole beside her, his presence solid as the mountain itself. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of depositions, evidence gathering, and threats from Briggs's remaining supporters. But the federal marshals had kept order, and now the moment of reckoning had arrived. All rise, the bailiff called, and the crowd rustled to its feet as the judges entered. Briggs was brought in shackled, his shoulder bandaged, his usual commanding presence diminished, but his eyes still held venom when they found Eliza. Behind him, Jake Morrison and 6 other conspirators filled the defendant's bench. District Attorney Harrison, brought in from Denver to ensure impartiality, stood to present the charges. Your Honors, the territory brings charges of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and corruption against these defendants. We will show a pattern of systematic killings spanning 15 years, all for the purpose of illegally acquiring land. The defense attorney, a slick man named Whitmore, also from Denver, immediately objected. Your Honor, my clients are respectable businessmen. These charges are based on the hysterical accusations of a woman trying to justify her sham marriage. Objection, Harrison cut in. The legitimacy of Mrs. Maddox's marriage is not at issue here. Isn't it? Whitmore pressed. The court should know that this supposed evidence was obtained through breaking and entering, theft. Judge Watson's gavel cracked down. Mr. Whitmore, we'll address the evidence when it's presented. Proceed. Mr. Harrison. The prosecutor called his first witness, Martha Henderson. The elderly woman took the stand with dignity, ignoring the glares from Briggs's supporters. Mrs. Henderson. Harrison began. You helped clean Dr. Pemberton's office after his death? I did. His widow was too grief-stricken to sort through everything properly. What did you find? Martha's voice strengthened. Bottles and bottles of mercury compounds, more than any doctor would need for legitimate treatment, and lists of names with payment amounts beside them. Did you recognize any names? All of them. Every person on those lists died of mountain fever within months. Every one owned land Mr. Briggs later acquired. The crowd murmured. Whitmore rose to cross-examine, trying to shake her testimony, but Martha held firm. She'd lived through too much to be intimidated now. Next came Ben Taylor, who testified about threats made against anyone who opposed Briggs. Then Samuel Wright, the banker, pale but determined, revealed how Briggs had manipulated loans and foreclosures to force sales. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Dr. Hartley, the physician who'd bought Pemberton's practice, took the stand carrying a medical bag. Dr. Hartley, Harrison said, you've examined the medical records in question? I have. As a man of science, I was appalled. He pulled out bottles from his bag. These are the medicines, Doctor. Pemberton was administering mercury sulfide, mercury chloride, various compounds that, in these doses, would cause exactly the symptoms described as mountain fever. Can you explain for the court? Doctor. Hartley nodded. Mercury poisoning is insidious. Small doses accumulate over time. The victim experiences weakness, tremors, confusion. Increase the dose gradually, and it mimics wasting diseases. The victims die slowly, seemingly naturally, never suspecting they're being murdered. Speculation. Whitmore objected. Science. Doctor, Hartley corrected firmly. I've tested residue from the bottles. The concentrations are far beyond therapeutic levels. This was deliberate poisoning. The courtroom erupted. Judge Watson gavelled for order as Eliza felt Cole's hand find hers, squeezing gently. Her father's murder was being acknowledged, finally, publicly. Harrison then called Eliza herself to testify. She took the stand with her head high, meeting Briggs's hate-filled stare without flinching. Mrs. Maddox. Harrison began gently. Tell us about your father's final days. Eliza's voice was steady as she described the symptoms, the deterioration, Pemberton's insistence on continued treatment despite her protests. She produced her father's journal, reading his final entries aloud. The courtroom was silent except for muffled sobs from some who'd lost family the same way. Your father wrote about silver deposits, Harrison noted. Can you elaborate? The true vein runs deeper than the surface deposits. My father found it with help from the Ute people before they were forced from the land. It's worth perhaps $100,000 or more. Gasps echoed through the room. That kind of wealth explained everything. The murders, the elaborate conspiracy, the desperation to acquire the land. Whitmore rose to cross-examine, his approach aggressive. Mrs. Maddox, isn't it true you married a stranger just to keep this valuable land? I married to preserve my legal rights to my inheritance. Eliza replied calmly. A marriage of convenience, then? A fraud? Cole stood abruptly. Watch your tongue about my wife. Mr. Maddox, sit down, Judge Watson ordered, though not harshly. Whitmore smirked. Touching. Tell me, Mrs. Maddox, where does your husband sleep? The question hung in the air, its implication clear. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. The sleeping arrangements in my marriage are not relevant to whether these men committed murder. But they're relevant to your credibility. If you'd lie about a marriage, I've lied about nothing. Eliza interrupted. I entered into a legal marriage with a good man who helped me when no one else would. What grew from that? She paused, looking at Cole. seeing the intensity in his gray eyes. "What grew from that is between us and God." Harrison redirected, introducing the evidence found in Pemberton's cellar: payment records, poison schedules, correspondence with Briggs. The documentary evidence was overwhelming. Then came the surprise witness. You, Marshall Thompson, took the stand, producing a telegram. "3 days ago, we arrested Mrs. Lydia Pemberton in Colorado Springs. Faced with evidence of her late husband's crimes, she's agreed to testify in exchange for leniency." Briggs went white. Jake Morrison muttered a curse. The marshal continued. "She's provided additional documents her husband hid, including this." He held up a contract. "An agreement between Harlan Briggs and Dr. Pemberton, dated 6 years ago, outlining payments for special medical services to be provided to specific patients. It's signed by both men." The defense's case crumbled. Whitmore tried to claim coercion, forgery, anything to explain away the evidence. But when he called Briggs to testify in his own defense, the former mayor's arrogance betrayed him. "Those people were obstacles to progress," Briggs snarled from the stand. "This town needed leadership, vision. If some had to be removed for the greater good—" "That's enough," Whitmore practically shouted. But the damage was done. Briggs had all but confessed. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they filed back in, their faces were grim but determined. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder," the foreman read, "we find all defendants guilty." The verdicts continued. Guilty of murder, guilty of fraud, guilty on all counts. Eliza sagged against Cole, relief and grief warring in her chest. Justice for her father, for all the victims. But it couldn't bring them back. Judge Watson pronounced sentences: hanging for Briggs and Pemberton's estate, prison for the others. As the condemned were led away, Briggs twisted to glare at Eliza one last time. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You'll never keep that land, never work that mine. You'll hang," Cole interrupted coldly. "And we'll build something good on what you tried to steal. That's the difference between us. Briggs, you tear down, we build up." Outside the courthouse, the crowd parted for them. Some offered condolences for her father, others congratulations on the verdicts. Sarah Fuller embraced Eliza tearfully. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." But as Eliza looked up at Cole, she knew Sarah was wrong. The trial was over, the conspiracy exposed, justice served, but something else was just beginning. "Walk with me?" she asked Cole quietly. They strolled away from the crowd, finding quiet near the church where they'd married just weeks ago. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. "The 30 days are up tomorrow," Eliza said softly. "You're free to go." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What if I don't want to be free? What if I want to be bound to you, to this place, to what we could build together?" Eliza's heart raced. "Cole Maddox, are you proposing to a married woman?" A rare smile crossed his weathered features. "Seems I'm proposing that we stay married. Make it real this time. Not for land or law, but because somewhere between that first night in the alley and today in that courtroom, I fell in love with my wife." Eliza reached up, touching the scar on his jaw with gentle fingers. "A fortunate thing," she murmured, "since I seem to have fallen in love with my husband." He kissed her then, there in the churchyard where their unlikely story began, as the mountains stood witness to an ending that was really a beginning. Tomorrow they would face the work of building, mining the silver, healing the town, creating the life her father had dreamed of. But tonight, they were simply Cole and Eliza Maddox, bound by choice rather than necessity, love rather than law. And that, Eliza thought as she leaned into her husband's embrace, was worth more than all the silver in the mountain. The morning after the verdict, Dustwater Creek felt different. The shadow that had lain across the town for years was lifting, and with it came a reckoning. Some of Briggs's supporters slunk away in the night. Others came to the Maddox house with hat in hand, seeking forgiveness or at least understanding. Cole and Eliza stood on their porch, watching a line of wagons approach. At the lead rode Martin Fuller, Sarah beside him, their boys perched in the wagon bed. Behind them came the widow Martinez with her sons, Ben Taylor with his family, and dozens of others. "What's all this?" Eliza asked as they drew near. Martin dismounted, pulling off his hat. "We've come to help. If you'll have us, figure it's time this town learned to stand together instead of apart." "The mine," Cole guessed. "And more," Sarah Fuller added. "We've been talking. This town needs rebuilding, not just buildings, but trust, community. We thought maybe you could help with that. Eliza, you've been doctoring our bodies all these years. Maybe now you can help doctor our spirits, too." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. These people who had stood by in fear, who had let her father die unavenged, they were here now, ready to change. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was a beginning. "There's work for everyone," Cole said, understanding what was needed. "The mine will need proper shoring, equipment, workers, and the profits." He looked at Eliza, who nodded. "The profits will be shared. Fair wages for fair work." A cheer went up from the crowd as they dispersed to begin work. Eliza noticed a familiar figure hanging back. Jake Morrison, arm in a sling from the trial, stood by the gate looking uncertain. "You've got nerve showing up here," Cole said, hand drifting to his gun. Jake held up his good hand. "I ain't here for trouble. I wanted to say something." He looked at Eliza, shame clear on his scarred face. "Your father delivered my sister's baby when Doc Pemberton was too drunk to ride out, saved both their lives, and I repaid that by—" He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. It ain't enough, but I'm sorry." Eliza studied him for a long moment. The easy thing would be to turn him away, nurse the justified anger. But her father had believed in healing, in second chances. "Can you work with one arm?" she asked. Jake blinked in surprise. Yes, ma'am. I can." "Then get a shovel. Redemption starts with sweat." As Jake hurried to join the work crews, Cole shook his head in amazement. "You're going to forgive them all, aren't you?" "Not forgive," Eliza corrected, "but give them chances to earn forgiveness. There's a difference." The work began in earnest. The silver vein, when properly excavated, proved even richer than expected. But more important than the wealth was what grew around it. The mine operated on principles unheard of in most Western operations. Fair wages, safety equipment, reasonable hours. Families flourished. Children who'd gone hungry now attended the new school Eliza funded. 3 months after the trial, she stood in her medical office, expanded now, with proper equipment ordered from Denver, treating young Tommy Morrison's broken arm. Jake's nephew had fallen from a tree, and his uncle had brought him straight to her. "Hold still now," she told the boy gently. "This will sting a moment." The door burst open, admitting Cole and Miguel Martinez. "Doc, we need you at the mine," Miguel said breathlessly. "Cave in on the new shaft. Men are trapped." Eliza grabbed her emergency bag, the one always kept ready. "How many?" 6, maybe 7, Cole said, already leading the way. "We've got them talking through a gap, but James Fuller—" He paused. "It doesn't look good." They rode hard to the mine, where a crowd had already gathered. Sarah Fuller stood white-faced at the entrance, her younger boy clinging to her skirts. The older one, James, was somewhere in that darkness. "Talk to me," Eliza ordered the mine foreman. "Partial collapse in Tunnel 3. We've got a small gap for air and communication, but James is pinned, his legs crushed, and he's losing blood." Eliza made her decision instantly. "Make the gap bigger. I'm going in." "Eliza, no." Cole grabbed her arm. "The whole thing could come down." "Then you'd better make sure it doesn't." She looked at him steadily. "That boy is 13 years old. Cole, I won't let him die in the dark." Cole held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Make the gap bigger," he barked. "And bring every timber and support beam we have. Nobody dies today." They worked frantically to widen the opening, just enough for Eliza's small frame. She squeezed through into the darkness, her lamp revealing a nightmare of fallen rock and splintered timber. The trapped miners huddled in a pocket of space, and there was James, his leg twisted at an impossible angle, face gray with shock. "Hey there, brave boy," she said softly, already assessing the damage. "I'm here to help." "It hurts, Doc," James whimpered. "I know. I'm going to make it better." She worked quickly, tying off the worst bleeders, administering laudanum for the pain. The leg would need amputation. She could see that immediately, but not here. Not in this tomb. "Doc!" One of the miners pointed to the ceiling. Dust was sifting down, cracks spreading. The whole thing was about to go. "Get the others out," she ordered. "Now!" "Not without you and the boy," the miner protested. "That's an order." She turned back to James, working desperately to free his leg from the rubble. Cole's voice came through the gap, calling her name, but she ignored it. The bone came free with a wet snap that made James scream. "Move!" She hauled the boy up, adrenaline giving her strength. The miners were squeezing through the gap as the rumbling grew louder. Eliza pushed James ahead of her, hands supporting his weight, praying with each step. They tumbled through the opening just as the tunnel collapsed completely, the roar of falling rock drowning out the crowd's screams. Cole caught them both, pulling them clear as dust billowed out. "The leg has to come off," Eliza said immediately. "Get him to the office, Sarah. You'll need to be strong." The amputation was the hardest surgery she'd ever performed. Not technically, but emotionally. This boy who'd shunned her months ago, whose father had threatened her, now lay trusting his life to her hands. Sarah Fuller held his head, whispering prayers and promises. When it was over, James sleeping peacefully under the laudanum. Sarah collapsed in tears. "You saved him. After everything we did, everything we didn't do, you saved him." "It's what doctors do," Eliza said simply. "It's what humans do for each other, when fear doesn't get in the way." News of the rescue spread quickly. The woman they'd once called witch had risked her life for a miner's son. The mine Cole managed had safety standards that prevented greater tragedy. The wealth they could have hoarded was building schools and bringing prosperity to all. A year passed. The mine thrived. The town grew, and new businesses opened to serve the influx of workers drawn by fair treatment. The Maddox house on Sage Mountain had expanded too, with a proper surgery wing for Eliza's practice and a library where Cole taught mining engineering to young men eager to learn. On a crisp autumn evening, they stood together watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Eliza's hand rested on her swelling belly. Their first child. "Due in winter. Regrets?" she asked softly. Cole pulled her close. "Only one. I wish your father could see what you've built." "He does," Eliza said with certainty. "Every life saved, every family fed, every chance given for redemption. He sees." Below them, Dustwater Creek sparkled with new electric lights, funded by the mine's profits. The sound of construction echoed from the valley, a new hospital rising, bearing the name Josiah Thorne Memorial. "You know what I love most about our story?" Cole mused. "What's that?" "It started in darkness, you cornering a dangerous man in an alley with desperate demands. But look where it led." He gestured to the thriving town, their home, their coming child. Sometimes the most desperate gambles yield the richest rewards. Eliza smiled, remembering that scared but determined woman who'd propositioned a stranger. "I demanded 30 days and $5,000, and gave me a lifetime and treasures beyond counting." Cole finished, as if summoned by their contentment. Riders appeared on the road. Not threats this time, but Dr. Hartley with news from Denver. The medical board had approved Eliza's application. She would be the first licensed black woman doctor in the Colorado Territory. That night, Dustwater Creek celebrated. In the town square where men had once gathered to oppose their marriage, now people danced. James Fuller, learning to walk with his wooden leg, was spun laughing by his mother. Jake Morrison, now the mine's steadiest foreman, raised a toast to the Maddoxes. Even the widow Martinez, usually so proper, was convinced to dance by Ben Taylor. Cole and Eliza stood together, watching their town, for it was theirs now, in every way that mattered, celebrate not just their success, but its own redemption. "Thank you," Eliza whispered to her husband, "for taking a chance on a desperate woman's demands." Cole kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for demanding more than I knew I needed." Above them, the stars wheeled overhead, eternal witnesses to how love could grow from necessity, how justice could bloom from injustice, and how a woman's desperate demands in darkness could lead to light enough for an entire community. The Sage Mountain mine would produce silver for generations, but its greatest treasure would always be the story of Eliza and Cole Maddox, proof that sometimes the most unlikely marriages yield the truest love, and that courage in the face of fear can transform not just 2 lives, but an entire town. In years to come, when travelers asked about Dustwater Creek's prosperity and harmony, old-timers would just smile and say, "Well, it all started when the mountain woman cornered a gunslinger in the dark, and her demands went far beyond his fears." Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'm curious to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more stories of courage, romance, and redemption in the American frontier. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Cole and Eliza's journey. What part touched your heart the most? Share your feelings in the comments and let's celebrate these timeless tales together.